From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight: Qatar is working with the Taliban to reopen Kabul International Airport as soon as possible. A Qatari technical team flew into Kabul on Wednesday to discuss reopening the airport. It is the first plane to land there since the evacuation of American military troops from the country, which ended on Tuesday. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani is Qatar's foreign minister. He said in a news conference in the capital city Doha that he hopes to have the airport back in service in the next few days. The Taliban and officials from Afghanistan's Ariana Airlines said this week that departing American troops left the airport out of operation, with much of its infrastructure degraded or destroyed. Ariana International's maintenance director Ahmad Siar Rahat said damage to commercial planes will take at least 1 month and around $10 million to repair. Here is what Sheikh Al Thani, Qatar's foreign minister, had to say.
We are still in the evaluation process. There is no clear indication when it's going to be fully operational yet, but we are working very hard and also engaging with Taliban to identify what are the gaps and the risks for having the airport back up and running.
The United States is allowing some humanitarian aid into Afghanistan despite imposing sanctions against the ruling Taliban. Reuters reports that the U.S. Treasury Department has issued a license allowing the flow of aid from American contractors into the country, which is heavily dependent on foreign assistance. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Tuesday urged international support for the Afghan people in their darkest hour of need. Guterres said 18 million people, nearly half of the country's population, need humanitarian assistance to survive. Afghans are facing a severe drought and a potentially harsh winter. He said all basic services in the country may collapse completely. The current $1.3 billion UN humanitarian appeal for Afghanistan is only 39% funded at the moment. In the last 2 weeks, UN agencies have delivered food to 80,000 people and relief packages to thousands of displaced families in Afghanistan. Tens of thousands of Afghan evacuees will be resettled in the United States without visas as humanitarian parolees. That designation denies them a path to legal residency. They will not benefit from the formal services offered to traditional refugees, according to U.S. officials and aid groups. Afghan parolees currently at U.S. military bases will have limited assistance for up to 90 days, including a one-time stipend of $1,250. But they will not receive full medical, counseling, and resettlement services that are normally available to refugees. Nonprofit groups that help resettle refugees say billions of dollars in emergency funding is needed to help Afghan refugees start over. The Pope said in a radio interview this week that it is time for the West to stop the irresponsible policy of enforcing its own values on others. He was referring to events surrounding the American withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan, which ended on Tuesday. In the interview with Spain's radio network COPE, the Pope attributed this quote to German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who he called one of the world's greatest political figures. But the comment about enforcing values was actually said by Russian President Vladimir Putin. This was in remarks last month during a summit in Moscow with Merkel. Putin had said that the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan showed it was time for the West to end its irresponsible policy of imposing someone's outside values from abroad. Putin also criticized the West's attempts to build democracy in other countries without taking into account historic, ethnic, and religious issues and fully ignoring other people's traditions. Indian forces in Kashmir secretly buried the region's main freedom leader without allowing his family to be present. Sayyid Ali Gilani died Wednesday at his home in Srinagar, where he was under arrest for over a decade. He was 92. His son Nasim Gilani told the Associated Press that Indian forces snatched his father's body and forcibly buried him. Based on his will, Gilani's family wanted him to be buried after the morning prayers in Martyrs' Graveyard in Srinagar. India also shut down internet and cellular services and restricted people's movement in the region following Gilani's death. His passing is seen as a major blow to Kashmir's anti-India resistance movement. Sultan Mahmood Chaudhry, president of Free or Azad Kashmir, said Gilani was a beacon for Kashmiris. Pakistan has declared a state of mourning to mark Gilani's death. The country's Prime Minister Imran Khan paid tribute to him on Twitter. Khan wrote that Gilani struggled all of his life for his people's right to self-determination, suffering incarceration and torture by the occupying Indian state, but remaining resolute. The United States is moving ahead with plans to reopen its de facto Palestine mission, the State Department announced Wednesday. State Department spokesman Ned Price said the Biden administration will be moving forward with the process to reopen the American consulate in Jerusalem. The consulate was built before the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. It had long been a base for building American diplomatic relations with Palestinians. Former President Donald Trump closed it down in 2019. Trump also moved the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, recognizing the contested city as Israel's capital. President Joe Biden has vowed to restore diplomatic relations with Palestinians, which have been stalled since Trump's embassy move. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, however, opposed the idea. He said reopening Washington's consulate in West Jerusalem is a bad idea. He said the move will send the wrong message to the region, to Palestinians, and to other countries. Support for full-time, in-person schooling in the U.S. has declined among parents. This is after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, recommended that fully vaccinated individuals wear masks. Before this guidance, which was issued on July 27th, 58% of those surveyed said they wanted their children in school full-time this year. That figure dropped to 43% after the CDC's announcement, according to a survey by the CDC and the National Parent-Teacher Association. The poll surveyed over 1,400 public school parents between July 23rd and August 8th. Black and Hispanic parents were more likely than white parents to choose hybrid learning, the survey shows. The drop in support for in-person classes comes as cases of the Delta variant are rising nationwide. Thousands of students have had to quarantine after the first week of school. The Institute for Social Policy and Understanding has released new data on COVID-19 vaccine uptake and hesitancy among American Muslims. Its research, entitled Community in the Time of Corona, found roughly a third of American Muslims and members of the general public wanted to get the COVID vaccine as soon as possible. But a large percentage of American Muslims also expressed vaccine hesitancy, slightly more than the general public. Younger Muslims and Muslim women were more likely to be hesitant about vaccines than older Muslims and Muslim men. Muslims who identified as either Asian or white were more likely than Muslims who identified as Arab or black to want to get vaccinated, the research showed. Hurricane Ida, which slammed into the U.S. Gulf Coast last weekend and is now flooding the Northeast, could become the costliest weather disaster on record, the United Nations said on Wednesday. The Category 4 storm hit exactly 16 years after Hurricane Katrina made landfall in Louisiana and Mississippi. Both states are taking stock of the extent of the devastation. Petteri Talas, who heads the UN's World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, said Ida's economic cost could be higher than Katrina's.
Quite often these economic impacts are felt after the event, and that's likely to happen because we have seen major damage to the electric system in Louisiana, and there's even a chance that the economic loss will be higher than with Katrina.
The UN warned that weather-related disasters have skyrocketed over the past half-century. This has caused far more damage, yet fewer deaths due to a better warning system. A WMO report examined mortality and economic losses from weather, climate, and water extremes between 1970 and 2019. More than 11,000 disasters have caused more than 2 million deaths and $3.6 trillion in losses. Over 91% of disaster deaths occurred in developing countries, according to the report. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is encouraging vaccine-hesitant Republicans to get the shot in a number of ads. He is pushing back against skepticism about the shot from many members of his own party. COVID-19 cases continue to rise with the highly contagious Delta variant. They are overwhelming hospitals nationwide, particularly in red states. Earlier this summer, McConnell used funds from his re-election campaign for a radio ad aired on 100 radio stations in his home state of Kentucky to encourage COVID vaccinations. In his new 30-second PSA, McConnell draws on his personal experience as a polio survivor. He says, "Today, America's been polio-free for 40 years, thanks to vaccinations." McConnell adds, "We'll beat COVID-19 with vaccines too. Protect yourself and your family. Get vaccinated." COVID-19 hospitalizations have peaked since January, with more than 100,000 people hospitalized nationwide, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Virtually all of those hospitalized are unvaccinated people. Automakers are cutting production due to difficulties getting supplies from Malaysia because of COVID. The Southeast Asian country has emerged as a major center for chip testing and packaging. Many key suppliers, such as NXP Semiconductors and ST Microelectronics, have plants in Malaysia. In the last few weeks, Nissan and General Motors have warned that the component shortage has gotten worse. This is due to a scarcity of workers attributed to COVID-related lockdowns. Over 16,000 people have died of COVID in Malaysia. The Muslim-majority country is home to 32 million people. The Malaysian government fell in August because of the pandemic. Currently, the new prime minister is quarantined because of exposure to the virus. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. In one of our previous in-depth analysis segments, we discussed the financial aspect of Taliban's governance. Let's watch.
Gretchen Peters is an executive director of the Center on Illicit Networks and Transnational Organized Crime, or better known as CINTOC. She's a leading authority on the intersection of crime and terrorism, money laundering, and transnational crime. She says despite all of this, the Taliban have a lot of money and are really well funded right now. So to join us and to discuss this further, welcome, Gretchen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Gretchen, how long have you been studying the Taliban?
I covered Afghanistan as a journalist for about 11 years, working on both sides of the Durand line in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And I spent a lot of time looking at researching and reporting on the illicit activities undertaken both by the various factions of the Afghan Taliban, but also the Pakistani Taliban and other regional jihadi and extremist groups like Hizb Islami and Lashkar-e-Taiba and Al-Qaeda and other groups. So, all of these groups to some extent engage in some sort of illicit activity, whether it's extortion rackets or taxing trade that happens in their areas, both gray and black market trade, and engaging in kidnapping, timber trafficking, drug smuggling, all sorts of stuff. So I've looked at this across multiple different groups.
So right now, the Taliban that are in power, what is their primary source of funding?
Well, the Taliban have multiple sources of funding, and it's important to recognize that there are multiple Talibans. There are multiple factions, including the Haqqani network, which is out of the southeastern part of Afghanistan and the border areas from Pakistan. And there's also what's known as the Quetta Shura Taliban, which operates more widely in the south and west of Afghanistan. The Taliban gets a lot of money from the opium trade in Afghanistan, both from taxing it and also trafficking drugs, and also taxing and running, in some cases, drug processing plants. Other factions of the Taliban engage in timber trafficking, in artisanal mining, and they raise a huge amount of money just taxing the enormous amount of trade that goes, regional transit trade that comes through Afghanistan, goods that are coming in from Pakistan's Makran coast and trucked up to the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then up into Central Asia and parts of southern Russia.
Speaking on Tuesday at their first press conference since taking power, Zabihullah Mujahid, the Taliban spokesman, promised that the new government would not turn into the world's leading producer of opium, and essentially Afghanistan would not be a narco state. What do you make of this statement?
Well, Afghanistan already is the world's largest producer of opium, so the Taliban will have a tough time making that change anytime in the near future. The country is incredibly dependent, and farmers across the country are incredibly dependent on the opium trade to survive. So I don't think that they'll be able to get rid of it. In the past, back in 2000, when the Taliban were last in power, they did successfully impose a ban on farmers growing poppy, but they continued nonetheless to allow processed opium, to be exported from the country, and they taxed it and ended up making more money. So I would say the international community needs to be very wary of any promises the Taliban make about stamping out the poppy trade. That being said, the Taliban has been very effective at collecting tax from the regular transit trade, and I do believe that they'll be able to effectively continue taxing goods that come through the region.
Mm. In your book, Seeds of Terror, How Heroin is Bankrolling the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, you said that this previous ban that you just spoke about on poppy cultivation was tactical. Can you expand on that?
Yes, I believe it was tactical. The Taliban were under tremendous pressure at the time to stamp out the opium cultivation, and they stood to receive hundreds of millions of dollars in foreign aid, mainly through the United Nations, if they successfully eradicated the opium trade. However, what happened was that there had been so much poppy grown in the years leading up to the ban that they were sitting on a glut, and the prices were, the bottom was falling out of the opium market. And so what we saw happen was that the Taliban banned the cultivation of poppy, but they didn't do anything to stop poppy from being exported. And so many of us who were close to what was going on were able to discover that the Taliban leadership and the Taliban coffers grew widely as a result of this ban. So we believe it to be a tactical move to improve their position in the eyes of the international community, but still quietly make a lot of money off of the drugs trade. Again, I think the international community is going to have to take anything the Taliban say about promising to ban the opium trade with a grain of salt. Another important thing to mention right now is that in a lot of parts of the world, particularly the United States, which is battling a huge problem with addiction to opioids, the problem is really driven not by heroin or opium products that have been cultivated, but synthetic products. So in fact, demand globally for traditional heroin in a way, not these synthetic products, has gone down. And in fact, Afghanistan and the Taliban regions in recent years have become a larger player in the production of methamphetamines. So another move the Taliban couldn't pull at this point would be to make another tactical retreat from allowing Afghanistan to grow poppy, but they could still continue to produce other narcotics.
And there has been a plea for them for international assistance for alternative crops. What have you? Another question that I actually really want to ask is, do you think this continued? There is this demonizing and dehumanizing of Taliban in international media. Much of it is, yes, they have done atrocious actions when they were last in power. But do you think this will hinder peace, lessen the way that they are trying to present a moderate version of themselves? Or do you think this is all a sham?
Well, again, there's many different Taliban, and we're seeing that in the streets of Kabul and across Afghanistan today. Some units have behaved in a fashion that's relatively moderate. They have been, in fact, there have been calls from some, I was speaking to Afghan officials earlier today who were saying that the negotiators for the Taliban are saying that they want to have to be part of a multi-party government, that they want to continue to let Afghans elect their leadership, but they simply want to be able to participate in politics in Afghanistan. There are other units of the Taliban that are roaming the streets of Kabul, that are operating in other parts of the country, that are being very violent and thuggish, and are essentially behaving much the same way, if not worse, than they did 20 years ago when they were in power. So I think we have to be mindful of the fact that there are, as in any party, there are people who are more moderate and people who are more extreme. And it's going to be a question of which faction of the Taliban is able to, take command of their overall organization. If you can even say that they've come back into power as one organization. There've always been many factions of the Taliban, and they do not always get along. In fact, sometimes they'll actually fight each other.
Yes, there's this banner like the Taliban, right? And so as you're saying that there are different factions, perhaps do you think it would be a better journalism to identify those factions and connect their actions to their actual names rather than, I'm just looking at this from a perspective from within the Muslim community, that there seems to be, there are people who want peace in Afghanistan, who want the Afghans, they are wondering if the Afghans are not in support of the Taliban, why did it fall so quickly into their hands? So there are many questions that I know our community is asking, and experts like you can help us figure some of that out. So yes, I'd really love your take on that.
Well, I think we're still learning why, and piecing together why Afghanistan fell so quickly once the Americans really substantially started pulling out. And I think there were a number of factors. One appears to be that the Taliban, for months leading up to the American withdrawal, had been conducting a campaign in the countryside to bribe and threaten regional commanders and local government officials and tribes to come over to their side, essentially saying, we'll give you money if you peacefully accept the Taliban back into power in this area, or we will, and then issuing threats for what if they didn't accept them. So one issue was this very well orchestrated, in my opinion, very organized fashion in which the Taliban rolled across the countryside in the months leading up to the American withdrawal and really set the stage to move across the country. I've also, this is the third time since I've been in Afghanistan that the government has flipped. So I was first started working there in 1996 when the Taliban was originally in power. And after 9/11, when the foreign troops started rolling in, the Taliban basically melted away, and most of the country again fell to the United States without many shots being fired. The same thing happened this time when they came back, and actually when the Taliban came into power the year before I got there, the same thing happened. It's been my experience, and I've spoken to other Afghans and Pakistani friends who have covered the region for decades, much longer than me even, and we've all come to the same conclusion. I think Afghans are not only pragmatic, but they're war weary. They don't want to fight, and they don't want to see their homes and their villages destroyed again. And so when they feel like the wind is blowing a certain way, people will start getting in line behind that. And they saw the Americans were pulling out. And while surveys and various other indications show that on the balance, the Afghans preferred the government of Ashraf Ghani over the Taliban, it wasn't like they were particularly enamored of that government. That government had been very corrupt, both under Hamid Karzai and under Ashraf Ghani. The government had failed to deliver on a lot of services that people wanted. And so I think there was a reticence to really stand up and put their lives on the line to support that government.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your analysis. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. The Muslim American Law Enforcement Association received an award for charity work. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
There are thousands of Muslims, if not tens of thousands in America, in uniform. They serve our military, Air Force, Navy, Marine, and they are police officers. And they are in the front lines when it comes to fighting COVID as physicians and surgeons and nurses, and of course in the fire department. But we don't get to hear about Muslims in uniform. And today is one of those exceptional opportunities. Then we will get to talk to someone who is in that situation. With us is Lieutenant Kamil Warait. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Network TV.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Lieutenant Kamil Warait is serving at Osbury Park, New Jersey Police Department. and he's also founding president of Muslim American Law Enforcement Association. Well, we came to know you that you received an award for services, your Muslim American Law Enforcement Association. So congratulations, and tell us what is it which you did, which I didn't.
So the Muslim Law Enforcement Association, also known as MALIA, received the Law Enforcement Association of the Year award from an organization called Violence and Intervention and Prevention Specialist, which is led by a retired police captain, Donna Roman Hernandez. The award was presented to us because of our extensive charity work in our first year of inception, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. MALIA has been a collaborator between different charity organizations and law enforcement agencies throughout New Jersey. Our goal is to help the less fortunate in a time of need, while also creating opportunities for the public to get to know the police officers and vice versa. And, and get our community to get to know law enforcement on all different levels of government, such as county, state, even federal. And which is why, we invite Sheriff's Office, Prosecutor's Office, Attorney General's Office, whenever we have events, because we want our community to get to know these folks and vice versa.
Excellent. Tell me this, Lieutenant, what does your organization do other than providing services? Do you help each other, or do you do some collective bargaining to have prayer place or something like that?
So we're not a collective bargaining unit, which is, that's usually more of a contract agreement, that's not what we do. We're a fraternal organization. MALIA was initiated last summer. We felt there was a significant need for a formal platform for Muslim police officers in New Jersey. I had a vision, and once I decided to act on it, I wasted no time. The events of last year played a significant role in the establishment of MALIA. The pandemic, because it created an enormous opportunity to serve the physical needs of our communities, especially of color. And second, the murder of George Floyd, which created an immediate need to mend our relationship with the public, as well as take a closer look at ourselves as law enforcement and implement reform to better serve the public. MALIA was on the forefronts, taking steps to improve law enforcement profession in order to improve our relationship with those who we've sworn to protect and serve. MALIA has 4 prominent goals, and it's continuously working to achieve them. 1, providing educational programs to Muslim and other communities regarding law enforcement practices and vice versa. We're working hard to dispel misconceptions on both sides. We've held youth information sessions regarding how to interact with the police, stay out of trouble, especially on how to secure a career in law enforcement, because many of us are immigrant and first-generation cops. Our community simply doesn't have the kind of guidance that one may need to navigate the confusing and sometimes intimidating selection and hiring process. Another goal is engaging in charity work, and we've had numerous charity events throughout the pandemic with great success, and the recent award speaks to it. We also pay close attention and analyze policy changes, as well as monitor legislative advances regarding law enforcement, which we've seen a tsunami of within the last year here in New Jersey. And lastly, we provide a fraternal bond for association members and other law enforcement officers throughout the state. I'm also a resiliency officer for the state of New Jersey Fraternal Order of Police, and serve as a peer support for cops in New Jersey. Taking care of each other is extremely important to us. You are your brother's keeper, as they say. It's a tough time to be a police officer. Yes, we need a lot of reform and accountability in our business. We also need a lot of support from the public to do what we do to protect them as well as ourselves.
Tell us this, how many Muslim are in the police force in New Jersey or say in New York area?
I wouldn't know about New York, and even in Jersey, I don't have a specific name, a number. I could tell it's in hundreds. So, I mean, our organization has 100 sworn law enforcement officers, and but we are all inclusive and interfaith organization. So most of our members are Muslim, but there are members that belong to other faiths. And it was important for us to be all inclusive.
So, Lieutenant, why did you decide to join the police force? When you were young, you always wanted to be police officer. Your parents let you be police officer instead of being a doctor or engineer?
Well, I didn't have that issue. I'll be honest. My parents were very supportive of my career choice. Law enforcement is a noble yet extremely challenging career, especially in today's world. So my initial appeal to the profession may have been more along the lines of the exciting aspect of the job, catching bad guys kind of thing. But over the years, as I've grown in my career and rank, it has developed more into serving the overall needs of the community rather than just focusing on the crime fighting, so to speak.
So good parents, God bless them. So they will be helping, supportive. Do other Muslims question why in the world did you become a police officer?
No, I think there is a lot of appeal for this profession right now, contrary to what people think. It is a lucrative profession. I will use the word lucrative because it is excellent benefits, excellent salary, and you can do good for yourself and your family. And the biggest of all, that it gives you a chance to give back to your community. It gives you a chance to serve and protect yourself, your family, and others. So there's a lot of good that comes with this job.
But a lot of risks as well. When you serve in that capacity, there is a possibility that you encounter a criminal who may be more quick with his gun.
No, absolutely. That's always there. But me, especially as a Muslim, I mean, I believe when it's your time, you take the precaution, you take all the precaution, you rely on your training. But if something is meant to happen to you, it's going to happen to you, and it's, if that's, so I don't let that hold me back or worry about, I look at the good in this profession. And yes, it's, the profession is about sacrificing and sometimes paying the ultimate sacrifice.
So how long have you been serving?
16 years between New Jersey Department of State Corrections and Asbury Park Police, where I'm in the rank of lieutenant now.
Would you, encourage other young people to think of the police career?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's one of the greatest careers. I wouldn't do anything differently. I am very happy with my decision to pursue this. Like I said, by no means it's not an easy career and it's not for everybody. However, it's very rewarding, and at least I find it to be very rewarding. And also it has a lot of room to grow and, change things for the better. So if you really are a person who takes that self-initiative and truly wants to, change things for the better, you will have that opportunity. You will be presented with that window to make a difference.
In the world of Black Lives Matter, when police is constantly being questioned in media and discussed, and of course there are human beings, there are good cops and bad cops and all that, do you see your job has somewhat become more sensitive and more challenging since the Black Lives Matter movement became stronger?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a clear narrative out there that wants to paint police in an extremely negative light, and not to say that we do not have areas where we need to improve and make reform. and also not to say that we haven't been wrong. We're human beings and we make mistakes, and sometimes those mistakes are unintentional and sometimes they are intentional. So, that's where the accountability comes into the profession. But, it has, I look at it as room to grow. We can take a closer look at ourselves and change our profession for the better.
Lieutenant Wright, you have been serving for 16 years, so you have seen the world around you. Have you encountered Islamophobia here and there?
Yes, unfortunately, I have personally experienced discrimination and Islamophobia in my profession. But to me, that is absolutely not a valid reason to stay away from this otherwise immensely rewarding career. In fact, I see that as all the more reason for young people to join law enforcement and try to change the police culture from within. I think that's the best way to change it, is always from within. So to me, I have a simple...
Right? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I have a simple philosophy, and to me, whatever race or religion you belong to, be proud of it. Be who you are unapologetically. However, respect everyone, including their differences, and don't impose yourself onto others. Conversely, don't be a pushover either, and stand your ground firmly when you're in the right. If you can't fight for your own rights and respect, how can one expect you to fight for others and protect them against any injustice? So being able to stand up for what's right may not always be the popular thing to do, but I believe it is crucial to being a good police officer.
Well, that's a universal truth. Thank you so much. Lieutenant Camille Wright from Asbury Park, New Jersey, founding president of Muslim American Law Enforcement Association. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much to the Muslim News Network News, allowing me the opportunity to come on and speak regarding Malia. Much appreciated. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Back to you, Samana.
Thank you, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.